Good evening, and thanks for being with us. Next here on CMU Public Television, Senator Darwin Booher joins me on Capitol Report.
Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
Appreciate you joining us. I'm David Nicholas as we welcome back to our program State Senator Darwin Booher. He is a Republican from Everett and currently serving in his first term for the 35th District. Senator, as always, good to see you and welcome back.
And Dave, it's nice to be back on your show.
House and Senate this past week came to an agreement on a mid-year funding bill that includes $215 million for road repairs. Now, there's a lot to get at with the road issue, but before we get a little bit more in depth on that, what else was in that mid-year bill that was passed?
Well, not only was the roads important in there, there was funding for some of the disaster areas that we had, ice storms, floods on the western side. There's funds in there. There's funds in there for the heating assistance, money in for Medicaid, the 90-day IE that we didn't put in immediate effect, $65 million in there for that. For our mental health, $25 million because they will be running out of money, and that also was in there.
Now, there was a figure, I thought, of $100 million shortfall in Medicaid. You mentioned $65 million. Are we talking the two, and is this then an issue we still have to deal with?
Yeah, it was $95 million. And so you have $65 million for that shortfall, and we have $25 million in for the mental health, so $95 million, general fund.
On the road issue, both chambers had put forth proposals, and this figure of $215 million then represents a compromise between what House had allocated and Senate then?
Yeah, specifically on the roads, there was 14 different issues between the House and Senate in the supplemental. Supplemental had almost $330 million additional spending in general fund. Of that, $215 million is in the roads. The Senate wanted to close the HICA tax for our Medicaid. We needed $114 million in there. We had used that to close that gap for our portion of the Medicaid. And so the House put it all in roads. In the compromise, it all went to the roads. And so $100 million now for the potholes, we say, the winter snow, the other 115 for projects. As we did $115 million earlier this year, and we had about 400 projects turned in from our road commissions in the state. We funded about 104 of those. We still have 300 and some projects out there. This money goes toward those 300 and some projects.
How far does that emergency funding go when it comes down to breaking down what we see as the extreme conditions and the weather? How much will that touch statewide?
We didn't see the final total of all of the counties turn again. It will not cover all of it. It will help. Obviously, we had a lot more snow to the south than we normally get. And this last snowstorm in Lansing didn't hit us back in my Senate district. So we had additional costs further to the south in our state than we did. But take nothing away, we had enough snow in the north as well. And so this will not cover all, but this is a start to help. Because if we didn't do this, we would have very few summer projects. They're used up. The money that they had available is being used up. So I don't have a final number for what the total cost for the snow, and obviously this is potholes too that are going to be created, so don't have that final cost, but this goes toward that. Does not cover it all, though, I can tell you that.
Now, the surplus that we have been hearing much more about when those figures came out from the January revenue estimates, put that somewhere north of 975 as we were sitting down. You said some estimates put it a little bit over $1 billion. Is that where then the monies we've been talking about, is it all coming from surplus or allocated from somewhere else?
No, it's coming out of the general fund. When you look at the $1 billion, 970 if you want to use, I would say 101. When you're talking about $100 million here, $100 million there, but $1 billion, let's say, of that, in the budget we're in now, 500 million, over 500 was already used in that budget. So you didn't have $1 billion. You had about $600 million, 650 in those numbers to use, that you could use. This is where this money came from. So 215 million of that, additional 95 million for your Medicaid and your community mental health. So that's where it came from, general fund.
What remains then of the surplus? Where do we stand on the discussion of what to do with that? Because there were some that said, as we started to head into this winter, put it all towards the roads. There have been proposals out there regarding potential tax relief. Some said put it into the back into the school aid fund, rainy day fund. Where those discussions sit as we sit down today?
Still at this point, 120 million of that will go into the rainy day fund. And so, as we talked about 330, 130, we had 600, we had maybe 200 million, 250, still not allocated out. It is still there. We still have until October 1 or September 30th for this budget year. So it's a much better to have a little bit there that you can use than to be wondering which budget you're going to cut in order to take care of emergencies that you might have in this state. So there's still two things that I think the public need to understand. 115 million is still sitting in the road reserve fund. That's for road projects. So this came out of general fund, this 215, but we still had 115 million sitting in the road reserve fund for additional road work. So that's still out there as well for projects yet this year on our roads. So there's almost been 600 million of general funds since 2011, since this new Senate took over, been used for the first time in our roads already. I mean, it's just shy of 600 million. We hadn't been spending anything on our roads out of general fund. It's a huge difference in where we had. So having some funds available has been a good thing as we've recovered in the state.
The governor last year proposed asking for $1 billion plus each year for 10 years to fix the long-standing program. We've been talking about the money spent this year. There was a deal, obviously, where money was additional money was put into the spending for last year, but not that total. So I ask you, is the dollar figure that he proposed realistic? That is to say, do you have confidence that it's accurate to say that if we're really going to once and for all get to the solution of underfunding the roads and fixing the problem, is that the figure that we need to spend that much each year for those 10 years?
Because the money that he's talking about, the 1.2 billion that we needed a year ago, is more like 1.3, 1.4. Now, the small amount of money that we put in, even if it's 600 million, has not kept up. We're still going backwards. If you look at your roads and the depreciation on your roads, they're still going downhill. So you're at 1.3, 1.4 now. And that's only to maintain. That's not to do anything new to the roads. You need to double that number. You need to double the number if you're going to bring your roads up, back up. That's maintaining roads, the number he's given you. It isn't to rebuild your road system.
Bigger numbers.
Much bigger numbers.
Well, as briefly as we can sum this up, the 1963 Constitution dictates that 2 cents from every 6 cents of sales goes to the school aid fund. The sales tax was applied to what we pay in the pump at this state, and not every state does that. We can argue that applications like this and others may be part of an overall funding mechanism failure that has been shortchanging the money to go to the roads. Can we sit here today and say that?
We can say that. I think when people pull up to the pump in our state, and I represent 11 counties, now this the second largest Senate district, people pull up to the pump, they think all the money they pay there goes to the roads. They think that. We know that is not true. So shifting all of the money that you pay at the pump to go to the roads would be the right plan. So that I know if I'm paying for the roads at the pump, then it goes there.
But as soon as you're saying that, of course, then there's the funding shortfall for the schools, and then we're into another discussion.
130 million of that goes to the general fund, basically. The rest of it into the schools. So you have to make the schools whole if you're going to do this. And that takes basically where we are with the John Pro's Senate bill that takes and switches that money out and puts it onto the roads and makes that money our match money, so we always draw down $4 for every dollar we put in, or $5 for every $4 we put in from the federal government. That is about $130 million a year we need, and that's his bill that would take that money and do that. Now you have to make the school aid fund whole. You can't leave a hole of $300 million or so in the school aid if you switch that. But I think the people will understand that better if when I pump it into my car, all those funds are going toward the road.
What then is the latest and where we stand then to streamline this so that there is another way of structuring school aid payments to get that money going to the schools as it should, and yet making sure that, as you very well put, when we stand there at the pump, we know that that's going back into the road system?
I think there's at least 4 proposals out there. You understood what the governor wanted to do. I mean, he wanted to basically double the gas tax and the registration fees. In this state, they're just almost equal revenue streams coming into the roads. Registrations, gas tax, almost identically the same amount. So you raise those, you could do that. That's one option out there. Howard Walker had a proposal, and the bill is in, for a 1% sales tax. That would raise somewhere near $1 billion. Doesn't do everything we need to do, but then everyone would pay into this to help maintain the roads. Then you would shift additional money back to the schools. The third option is to go to the wholesale. Right at the pump, you'd tax at the wholesale level. That's another option. And there is certain people that believe that that's the way we should do it. You won't see this fluctuation at the gas pump as much, at least, after the first time you do that, because it's down here under the wholesale price. Another option out there that's been looked at. I believe, at least, and I'm not speaking for my caucus, but I believe before the end of this year, we will come to the resolution on that issue of one or maybe a combination of what I just talked about.
Even getting all the way back to that built-in language from the 63 Constitution to find a way to work through those numbers and have school money from here going to schools, road money from the pump going to the roads.
Absolutely. I'm on that infrastructure committee, set up special for this road funding in the Senate, and school funding is right there all the time. We have to make them whole if we do this. No question about that. So it'll be done when this change takes place. But there's not a lot of support for people to go to the pump and see it jump almost double. I mean, that's hard to swallow. I know we fluctuate 20 cents, 30 cents every time, and you say, well, nobody will notice the difference. It's where you put the blame for the price. Right now, you can blame wherever. But if you put that, double it, the blame will fall right there. So I think, right or wrong, there's not much the constituency wants to see when it comes to doubling gas or your registration fee when you have to buy that every year.
There have been proposals, and this kind of ties back to the surplus question, that there could have been possibly some personal and or property tax relief coming out of the money from the surplus. At the same time, and there's a couple of different layers here, you and fellow senators were working on a series of bills that focused on the personal property tax. There was 5 or 6 bills in this, and there's also payment in lieu of taxes, personal property tax, and business. Let's take them one at a time. This package, Senate Bills 825 to 830, yeah. What can you summarize for that?
Well, I would summarize that in that there's a real concern by our local governments that they can't stand any more cuts. They have to cut the services to the people out there. So those new bills that we're just talking about would make them whole. Now, when I say they're whole, I'm only speaking about cities, your townships, your villages, and your counties would start collecting in 2016 under these bills the personal property they lost totally. There would be 2 years in here for those 3 entities that would have a loss. Other than that, cities would receive everything back in personal property. That's what these bills were to do, was to make those whole so they didn't have to take a loss in revenues because of personal property. Although personal property to me, as an assessor myself, 28 years, is the most unfair tax we had in the state, because not everybody paid it. Only people that didn't have big-time lobbyists paid it. And so we needed to fix that. And we did a year ago. We did take it off, but it was over a long haul, long period. I think there would be no reason corporations, big employers wouldn't want to come to the state of Michigan now, because your Michigan business tax and your personal property tax are basically gone.
In that evolution of those taxes on business, we've gone through the Michigan business tax, the single business tax, and yeah, all of these, and we've seen the fluctuation in the revenues. Now a proposal that I believe is directly tied to your authorship that would eliminate the personal property tax on business.
Yeah, it's basically done now. I mean, anyone who has small business, you have to divide this out between the corporations and the small businesses. Small businesses, 80,000 true cash value or 40,000 are gone, out. They're done. And so you didn't get your notice this year at all. So they're basically done. Any new purchases by the corporations are done. That was under the old bills. Now, there will be a new tax on those who received a benefit from that to help cover the 100% loss. That's in this bill too. So the corporations aren't out of it totally, but it'll be spread by the state on all of those that benefited from the reduction of personal property tax.
And payment in lieu of taxes, or what we commonly think of as PILT,
yeah.
How are these bills impacting the overall structure?
Yeah, I think the PILT payment is basically the state of Michigan land that they own out there. That's PILT. PILT payments are to be made in full. Those were where our people in our townships have state land that they were not receiving the same taxes that you and I paid. They were either reduced 15% or 30%, whatever the state decided to do on those. We have got them back to whole. They are to be paid completely and in full and on time. And used to be, when we got it there in 2011, that they might get them in December, but you have places like Roscommon County in my Senate district, 60% of that land is state land in the whole county they own. 163,000 acres owned in Kalkaska County. If they don't receive those funds, they have to cash flow themselves. So we have made sure now that they're getting their payments and getting them in full. Right now, this particular year, we're looking at, because we added $1 to the swamp tax, and another $1 next year, so it'll almost double the amount that they receive from swamp tax. Huge, huge issue back in my Senate district in the rural part of the state, and I think we've come a long ways in that, and they're being made whole with the PILT payments.
Does transition us to, as well, some things on the natural resources front, you sponsored, and the Senate recently approved funding for projects under the Natural Resources Trust Fund. What are some of the highlights of that list of projects we'll see?
Well, highlights in my Senate district, Kalkaska, Manistee, Osceola, some of those counties all have projects in there. But every year, your oil and gas lease money is spent out there. The interest earned off of the $500 million corpus up there is used to development funds or acquisitions for projects within 83 counties in the state. This year it was 27 million about. Totally, if you say their locals help contribute 25% or a portion of these projects, it'll add up to about 46 million total in projects around the state. Those are local parks, developments, rails to trails, those kind of projects. The difference today that we have is when there is an acquisition project purchased by the state, has to have local approval by the local township or county boards. And we never used to have that. But because we have the land cap at 4.6 million the state can own in the state, we wanted that portion of it in there so that you had to get buy-in from your locals because of the amount of land already owned in Roscommon and Kalkaska and some of the other parts of our state. So this trust fund bill is something that we now look forward to because our locals are all involved in this and it's good for our communities.
And a lot of those lands are forest lands, as we know, up through the rural part of our state. What can you tell us about the Qualified Forest Program?
Well, Qualified is a forest program I was involved in the House, and thought it was a great program to get people on the private sector putting up more timber for sale. A lot of our trees are wasted, dropped in the woods, and now with all the diseases that you read about within our ash or our elm or our beech or now our maple, gives them an opportunity to go learn from your soil conservation departments, or a forest manager comes in and looks at your property and evaluates it and says this is the plan you ought to have. It gives the economic benefits is huge in the state of Michigan. Yesterday we had a UP testifying on where we're at, 6 months now into it. It became funded October 1 in this budget year. We had 90,000 acres over 6 years that ever went into it. Two main reasons that it didn't go in: I couldn't have a building on it, and if I pulled out of it, the penalty to get out was more than I would have gained from the tax relief, the 18 mills basically. We moved it from the DNR to agriculture. So it's all handled within the Department of Ag, which I believe is the right place for our forest to be, in agriculture, not into the DNR. So the report yesterday, we're up 58% the first 6 months. Our conservation districts were saying how busy they are. One of the people, foresters in the UP, said they've hired 26 more people. So it's doing what I believe. We're going at about 10,000 acres a month, adding to this. So we're at about 146,000 acres in it, and now we're only at 6 months. So that's going to have a long-term economic effect to our state as more and more people get into it. And we'll know over time on our private sector, the 11 million acres that we have in there, what's coming due at what point in time, and what plan says, I've got maple, it'll be harvested now. And you have to do it in order to, or you lose, and you have to pay back. So you have to stay with your plan or pay back. So I think it's, everything yesterday was very, very positive of the Qualified Forest Program.
Well, we're going to look forward to a resolution as things kind of come down and as the snow continues to melt, getting a better handle of what has been left behind by the extraordinary situation the winter weather has created on the roads. We'll continue to watch that and where all of these potential proposals for the short term and the long term come out all this, and of course work on the overall budget continuing as well. A lot of things from the roads into the forests and back, and we certainly appreciate your time in going through all of those things with us. Always good to have you here, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And thank you as well for joining us here again on Capitol Report. Our guest has been State Senator Darwin Booher, Republican from Everett in the 35th District. A reminder that our program will be seen again tonight in our overnight lineup here on CMU Public Television, and very shortly added to our website. You can go to WCMU.org, click on TV, and then to the WCMU Productions tab to find this, then, and all of our other programs in this current season for Capitol Report. For Chris Ogazali and our entire crew, I'm David Nicholas. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk again soon.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.